Welcome to Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. My name is Raghunath, and with me, of course, as always, is my dear co-host, Jai Jagannath Prabhu. And before we introduce these illustrious guests, just a quick word about what this is about. Real men arising, to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. And so today is a very special day for us. It's episode 20 of Arise. We've been at this a little bit shorter than these other wonderful gentlemen that are with us. And today's show is entitled Podcast Mela, the people behind the purpose. And so we wanted to create this Sangha platform for all these great souls to come together and just discuss a little bit about who we are, what we do, and why we do it. So just a brief introduction. Kaustuba Prabhu is in the top left corner of the screen. He's one of the co-hosts of Wisdom of the Sages, your daily yoga podcast, which started around the beginning of last year. They do it every single day. They've built up an incredible following over this past year. Especially over the quarantine period, people really having the opportunity to absorb their consciousness in the light of the Bhagavat that these wonderful Prabhus share every single day. So it's such an honor to have them with us. And then in the middle, top center, we have Raghunath Prabhu. Raghunath Prabhu has been on the path. He's been on the path of bhakti for many, many decades, as well as Kaustuba Prabhu, of course, arising from the New York hardcore punk scene and finding his way into bhakti. He used to be the lead singer of an amazing hardcore band called Shelter that many may be familiar with. And since then, he's become a master yogi. He takes people on pilgrimages, and he's just one of the most charismatic people that I've ever had the honor of experiencing. Unfortunately, not in person, but online. And so it's a great honor to know him. And of course, also just to mention about Kaustuba Prabhu, that he's one of the masterminds that brought the Bhakti Center into being, which is an incredibly dynamic project in New York City. That shares bhakti in such a relatable, palatable, wonderful, beautiful way with people. And so Kaustuba Prabhu has been a driving force behind that and such an immensely learned, wonderful person. And then we have our dear Namarasa. I feel like Namarasa is he's like the archetypal popular kid in the Krishna consciousness society. You know? Like, everyone just knows Nam. Everyone loves Nam. It's just a pleasure to come into contact with anything that he does. He's so entertaining and thoughtful and witty. And of course, he started his late morning program. How long's it been, Nam? Like 2-3 years?
2018 started. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Yeah.
The longest running Krishna podcast out there.
I believe it's the number one Hare Krishna podcast.
The number one Hare Krishna. I don't even know if that's true, but I just say it enough.
You know what? Just take it.
Believe it, yeah.
See the future, and you become the future. We're the dark horse running behind, chasing the tail of Namarasa.
Oh God! I knew that was going to come up. I knew that we were going to make. Oh, Krishna.
The late morning program is such a great name, isn't it? The late morning program, awesome. And you have to sort of.
I'm thinking about changing it. I don't know.
Don't. That is so. If you're a devotee who's lived in a Hare Krishna temple, if you're not, there's something called the morning program, and we've just it's the morning artik and services. I don't know if this is just an in-house Hare Krishna podcast or not. But to call it the late morning program, it's got it's like many that. and funny and good job on that.
Well, dear Prabhus, it's so lovely to be with you. Namarasa, I think we've given you a pretty solid introduction there.
Thank you.
Nice introduction. Karuna Avatar, when he speaks, is like a personified Rasgulla juice coming out, isn't it? With the accent and the words of glorification.
So really nice teeth also. Good teeth. Actually, you all have good teeth now that I'm looking around.
All right, gentlemen. I have 5 topics that I think could be interesting for us and also for those who would hear us today. My 5 topics I mentioned to you earlier are the inspiration behind doing this podcasting thing, the importance of it, the obstacles encountered in, just being creative in general, and in particular, the creative work of doing a podcast and trying to give meaning to whatever community that you're targeting. The 4th topic that I have on here is like finance, because that is a part, like this, it takes a lot of time to produce content like this on a regular basis. And, people got bills to pay. So that's something that could be interesting to be brought up. And the last thing is the responsibility of the platform, especially as one grows a little bit in popularity, it may start to weigh on the mind, the responsibility that one has when representing the tradition or representing philosophy, representing an ideal yogi or spiritualist, whatever it is. It starts to weigh more, and then you have that tension that you have to navigate between the responsibility you have to the tradition, but also being relatable and so there's stuff that comes up around that. So those are the 5 sort of interesting things that I have. And so I want to start with the inspiration, because it's just a natural starting point. What inspired you to create a podcast? And I want to start with Namarasa, since we're all chasing his tail, as Raghu mentioned. I want to start with Namarasa, and what was the inspiration behind it? I have to also say, I know a little bit of that story because I was part of that story as the first guest on your late morning program.
Ooh, yes.
So we want to hear the inspiration behind doing this.
Yeah, sure. I always wanted to be in radio since I was a kid for some reason. I love like the whole, like I'm just in my room, but I have this like very, intricate mic system and the headphones, and something about that always interested me. So then I thought that why don't I start something where I can talk to devotees? Oh, what it was I think I was having a conversation with you, Jai Jagannath, or maybe with someone else, and I was like, why isn't someone recording this? Like, this is such a great conversation we're having. Like, it can help devotees, it can help other people. Just the conversation we're having between ourselves. So I thought, why don't I just do that and see where it goes? Initially, it was like a joke. It was meant to be like, we would just talk, and I kind of wanted to, do it in the same way as like Joe Rogan does his like very laid back podcast. I know Raghunath was on that, but it's just like super laid back, and it's just a conversation. And so I wanted to do that, but do it with like spiritual topics, and maybe even further like things that devotees may go through that is not discussed in a Bhagavatam class. And so I did a few of them, and then I got really good response, like, wow, this is really helping, and you can discuss all kinds of things in this conversation format. So that was my initial inspiration to do it. It was just to see what happens, and then as time went on, it became something more serious, and something that helped, that I was getting a lot of feedback from devotees like this is helpful.
Nice. All right, same question, Raghu, Kaustuba.
You want to take it, Raghu?
Sure. Truthfully, I was impressed by Jai Jagannath's online Zoom class. I really was. And I thought, this is so cool. I was, yeah. And I knew a bunch of people that were like, yeah, you should get on Jai Jagannath's Zoom class in the morning. I was like, oh, I should, but I'm just a little lazy. And so every morning at Super Soul, I had a couple people come over. That's our farm upstate. A couple of people come over, and I'd give a class, a random class on random books. It was just out of order, just some Bhagavad Gita or a Krishna book or things like that, just so we'd have a little bit of a morning program out here in Grihastha land, away from devotee communities. And so that went on. And then when I was then I took a big group to India, and Leela Vilasini, who a lot of you know, she's a great friend, teacher, cool lady. We were eating at Govardhan at some ashram or somebody's house, actually, with like 20 of my students. And she just started talking about the Bhagavatam and the importance of the Bhagavatam and how you should read the Bhagavatam every day. And I was like, yeah, that's great. That's a really great idea. but she wouldn't stop, and she almost got a little aggro and weird. And I was like, "This is
You would have loved
weird.
it, Jay.
You would have loved it." She was just like went over the top, and I'm always very careful.
Like, yes, get it.
A lot of my students are like new. They're from the yoga community. They don't, I'm trying to introduce them to bhakti, and here I introduce them to this fanatic Kazakhstani / Serbian, out of control pundit, beautiful
Armenian
guru. And she's just like, going, and she starts like chastising everybody in a very uncomfortable way. And I was like, this is so weird. And anyway, I was like, privately, I said, why'd you do that? She's like, well, I'm just talking about the Bhagavatam. It's good. I know. I go, but you went on for like 25 minutes. It was embarrassing. And so anyway, it ended, and it just left a weird taste in my mouth. And then as soon as I landed, I came back and I met Kaustuba in New York, and he's go, hey, guess what? I'm going to do the Bhagavatam every day. We're going to try to get through the whole Bhagavatam. We're going to just read the verses. And when Kaustuba said it, then I said, well, maybe this is a sign, because I do class every morning. Maybe I'll just do that. Me and Kaustuba can check in with each other, and I'll just go through the entire Bhagavatam with my 2 students. And then I thought, you know what? I teach yoga, I teach yoga every weekend all over America and Europe and stuff like that. And a lot of people get inspired by the class, but because I teach philosophy as well as asana, they get inspired, but then I move on and go somewhere else. And wouldn't it be great if they could just sign in every morning? And so I put it out there to my students. So my first thing was for my students. My second one was back in the punk days. There were a lot of kids who got into Krishna consciousness a little, sometimes a lot. Sometimes they got initiated. Sometimes they got initiated and their gurus left the movement and they are estranged. Sometimes they got initiated, got second initiation, and then they got married, and then they got estranged. So I was thinking, this could be a chance for all those people to come back under an umbrella. But the third and maybe the most important one was I will be reading the Bhagavatam every day, and I'll have accountability of other people. So that started in like February in 2019. And we started doing it every day, and this just started growing. You get 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. And all of a sudden I started noticing Kaustuba would just sometimes sign in. I was like, oh, look who's here, Kaustuba. It was very, very informal and funny. And I'm a little bit more subdued. I was a little bit louder all over the place, snorting, laughing, falling off my chair. Kaustuba keeps me on a tight leash. But then Kaustuba, I started asking to Kaustuba, hey, what do you think about that, Kaustuba? And I'd unmute Kaustuba, and he would speak. And then after a while, people would be like, man, I love the way you and Kaustuba go back and forth like that. So by the time November came around, we were like, we should, and we were getting 100 people a day listening. And by the time November came around, I said, I had in my mind written down, I want to start a podcast by 2021. I had it written down a year before. By 2020, I want to start a podcast. I want to get on Joe Rogan. I want to invite Joe Rogan on the podcast. I want to get, and I had a whole list of guests. I want to get Moby on the podcast. But my time was going more into this morning class, which we call the Super Soul Sacred Sangha. And then finally, that just sort of became the podcast. And me and Kaustuba said, well, let's just do the podcast, but let's do it as the Bhagavatam class starting January 1st, 2020. Yeah. So that kicked it off. We were all in the Eco Village in India with about 50 students. And miraculously, it was a total Krishna miracle. Joe Rogan reached out to me in February and said, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. I would love to get you on my podcast. I was like, for what? He goes, I just want to know your yoga story. I was like, what? Do you want to debate me or something? He goes, no, I really genuinely want to know your story.
Your paranoia setting in.
Wait, I think we need a little context for that. So Joe Rogan is an old friend or acquaintance of yours.
Joe Rogan, I was his first yoga teacher.
Wow.
And I was also a martial artist with him. We fought together and did Brazilian jiu-jitsu together at a place called 10th Planet, which is a very big jiu-jitsu school, but it started when I was there with Joe Rogan. And It was a friend of ours who started it, and now it's international. So it was at a very cutting edge time in martial arts history, we sort of we became friends, not great friends, but we knew each other, and he respected me because I was on a very strict program of yoga every day. I was, a raw foodist. I was really thin and light, and I did pranayama every day, and I had a lot of stamina. He sort of
commented on his show once, right? He was like, that guy, like that Yoga Ray, like there's no way you can pin that guy down. He had this breathing thing going on.
It was true. It's true. I owe it all to pranayama and diet, but so he wanted to learn that stuff from me. So I started teaching him yoga, and we just loosely stayed connected. And people I never listened to his podcast, but people were saying, "Hey, Joe Rogan mentioned you again on the podcast." And so, anyway, out of the blue, he reached out to me, and it was totally Krishna's magical arrangement, because I didn't even realize, but he had he has and had the biggest podcast in the world, and it's unbelievable, the millions of people that listen to that. Yeah. So anyway, that's how we got started. And that Joe Rogan, which happened literally a month later, was a big bump for us and our following. And Kaustuba can share maybe something.
Kaustuba, you have any other angle of this story? I think it's also interesting, just bringing the element of you and Raghu's actual long-term relationship. Like, you guys been friends for like ages.
Yeah. Since the late 80s.
Dang. So, that's longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
That's sort of sad.
It's okay. Basically the story Raghu told is how it started. It wasn't, Raghu had a separate intention to start a podcast, but this wasn't it.
Right.
This was just reading Bhagavatam. And I was inspired by Vaisheshika Prabhu, like, hey, if you can read a certain amount of, my books are lying there on the shelf, and I read them more like, for reference, than like for, deep absorption. So I just got kind of hooked on that. My wife and I got hooked on that. We were reading 80 verses a day. You remember that, right?
No.
And
yeah, I do.
And so then, I mentioned that to Raghunath. And then, as he mentioned, I started coming on occasion, and then it became every day. And then I said to him, this is the podcast. It's right here. You're like, but that's not a podcast. I'm like, no, you put it up. It's a podcast. And so anyway, it just happened like that.
That kind of leads to my second round. It's not a podcast. The importance of this is kind of the second sort of category of questions that I have. And the reason this comes up in my head is that it appears to me that spiritual communities in general, and ours included, they're finding more interest in the podcasting platform than they are in like attending a lecture at a temple, for example. Mm-hmm. And personally, I've gotten this message when I've done conversational stuff with other friends, just on my Instagram live or something, that someone messaged this to me one time, that I prefer to hear the conversational kind of unpacking of like a particular verse of Bhagavad Gita, let's say, than just like the didactic, someone's teaching you what the philosophy is. And so it kind of occurred to me that the Bhagavatam's own format is kind of like that. It's usually a conversation between two people, and others are just getting the benefit of that conversation. Usually, of course, of adepts, those who are accomplished in bhakti. But that's the format. They're talking, and everyone else gets the benefit of their conversation. And so it kind of occurred to me that podcasting, in a sort of weird way, is becoming a sort of more important platform as we look into the future of how we might distribute spiritual knowledge, even to our own communities, what to speak of communities outside of it. And so, yeah, that's kind of the importance question. How do you feel the importance of what it is that you're doing?
I also just want to extend that a little bit and connect it to the first question, and basically say that if you had to describe the core essential purpose of what you are trying to do with your podcasts, like what is essentially the journey that you want to take people on, and what exactly is the impact in people's lives that you want to make, related to the general importance of this realm of online endeavor.
Nice. Who wants to go first? What is? I just want to make sure I got those questions. What is the core essential purpose of what you're trying to do? That was
Yeah.
one question. And what was your other one?
Just like what is the journey that you want to take people on? You know, like what is the impact? Like, what do you want their essential takeaway to be? Like, if you could write a testimonial, like your ideal testimonial of like a listener of your podcast, what would you, and kind of like the benefit and what they've gotten from it, like what would that be?
I think someone just commented Namras needs to shave his hippie hair.
I love your hippie hair.
Yeah, me too. No shaving the hippie hair.
I think what my kind of goal was, and I like the way you put it about the testimonial thing. I've gotten testimonials where devotees have said, you know, I was feeling uninspired, or I was feeling that my situation was unique, and I was feeling unrelatable. I couldn't relate with someone, but then after listening to this specific episode with this specific person, they said something that really, hit home for me, and I thought, you know, maybe I should take up bhakti more, and maybe I should, you know, that's exactly what I wanted to do, is just to make people feel that they could relate with something that's being said, much more than if it's like, okay, there's a class going on, and the speaker might say something, but if it's a conversation, then there's so many angles that can be taken from the person who's being interviewed and the person who's interviewing. There's like very different, and then also in this kind of platform, there's the comment section. People can actually take part in the discussion by, you know, saying, you know, writing a comment. So I think, to answer your question, it was more just about helping devotees relate with each other in ways that wasn't possible before with this platform. That makes sense.
It does. Raghu, Kaustuba.
I pick Kaustuba.
You know, when I see Nam's podcast, I think of that as it's a way of opening up the conversation in the community of devotees in ways that wouldn't be allowed commonly in temples. You know, that's what I really admire about what you're doing, and the effect that I've seen it have. And I mentioned this when you interviewed us on your show, but it's just like, you know, if Nam went to a temple president and said, I want to bring together like the community devotees and discuss racism in ISKCON, and also misogyny, and let's, you know, like the temple president's probably gonna be like, I don't think so, you know, and I wouldn't necessarily even, like, I could understand why they might be hesitant, but these are conversations that have to happen, and so that's, I think, just been an incredibly important part of what Nam's doing. And I think with Raghunath, you know, the way that I see it with Wisdom of the Sages is it's really a sadhana practice. You know, it's a daily hearing. Yeah, it's because even, you know, you're a teacher, I'm a teacher, Raghunath's a teacher. You know, we're used to working in like a weekly format. Like if you're doing some of the Bhakti Center, right? Like people come, okay, like every Wednesday we're going to do this, and you can come. But it's really, that weekly thing doesn't really, it's not so effective.
Right.
You know, it's a Nityam Bhagavata Sevya. It's got to be like a daily thing. You know, it increases it like 7 times. You know, plus like mathematically it increases it seven times. But it also keeps the momentum going, because otherwise you come back a week later and you've already forgotten half of what you heard, and you're halfway into it. If you miss 1 week, you go 2 weeks. You know, it's like, but so that daily hearing. That's for us, we've seen that makes a huge difference, that people, if they listen to Bhagavatam every day, it starts to change your life. So you know, what journey would we like to take people on? You know, first of all, to introduce them that here's a source of wisdom in your life that will give you the eyes to see your life, your struggles especially, but you know, your entire life in a way that's you know, that's been handed down by the great sages as a way to turn it all to your spiritual advantage. And so if people can get that, and it seems like a lot of people do get that, we get a lot of response, like, oh my God, this is changing my life. It's the Bhagavatam. It's just that they're hearing it every day. And then just one other thing I would add to that is Raghunath and I kind of have a strategy too that like kind of works on 4 levels. First one is social media. Second one is the show itself, the podcast. The third one is our Patreon community where there's more interaction. And then the fourth one is in-person trainings and pilgrimages and things like that. So if we always want to be there to kind of give people the next level of association.
Thank you for sharing your strategy. I took careful notes of that.
Okay.
He's copying our strategy, this guy.
I don't know if you'd like to add to that, Raghunath.
No, I think that's
Raghunath,
great.
please, yeah.
I'm lost and can't remember the question any
Yeah,
longer.
What's the journey you want to take people on? We're discussing the importance of this way of sharing the light.
Well, I really want to take a person wherever they're at. And I deal with, I think where Kaustuba deals with Bhakti 101, I deal with Bhakti 001, which is sort of like people like who know nothing about nothing. And I think because I am so steeped in Maya, I can relate to everybody in the material world. I can get right down to their level because I'm already down there. I don't have to climb into the gutter. That's where I'm living. So I feel like I like people. I genuinely like people, and I like to talk, and I can always somehow bring it up to Bhakti. And I think once they get into Bhakti, then me and Kaustuba do our talking. So I think we have 2 demographics, I think, on Wisdom of the Sages. Those who sort of just like, they heard me on Rogan, or they heard me on Rich Roll, or they know me from the music punk scene and want to check out what I'm doing, and they somehow find it. And they really don't know anything, but everybody, as we're getting older, we all need to be uplifted, and we need to speak about relevant things, whether a person's a Hare Krishna devotee or not. We need to think about things that improve the quality of our life, improve our quality of relationships, how to deal with depression and loss, and how to deal with success, and how to deal with the world and children, and how to deal with heartbreak. So I think we can deal with those very, very relevant topics. That is a very, very wide gate in life. And then if they want to go deeper, we'll say, well, this is how our tradition deals with all these things. And so really we find 2 demographics. People who are just like that. And then people who actually want to go deep, and they've opted in. Yeah, this is my path. And we're up to giving whatever they like. We're there for them. I think in the same way a person who's opted in for Krishna consciousness, they also want to deal with these things. Like, how do you deal with heartbreak? How do you deal with a husband that's not following the principles, but you want to follow the principles? How do you deal with, someone you love dies? These are all like very relevant things. And sometimes devotees who've been practicing for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, they need to go back and hear some like ABCs. So we think this is sort of
not sometimes. At least I can speak for myself.
Yeah. Well, what happens, I think, in a Hare Krishna community is you jump over those basics, and you go to these higher esoteric topics, and we get into fights about like origin of the soul, and end up offending each other. And
I got to do that episode. Thanks for reminding me.
Srila Prabhupada knew that as well, and that's why he repeated so many of the essential points so many times in his purports over and over again. But unfortunately, not so many devotees actually read it much anymore. It's an unfortunate common phenomenon. But luckily, you Prabhus are bringing that, with particular reference to Raghunath and Kaustuba Prabhus. And I also just want to comment that it's really incredible that you actually have that you've actually created facility, and that you have the capacity for people to come and for you to meet them wherever they may be at, that you've created that structure. And that it's just of immense value. And I feel it's really like on the cutting edge of what we as bhakti yogis can do for people in this impending age of isolation and technological, as induced by technology and whatever. So it's just absolutely wonderful. And yeah.
So I just want to say, I think podcasting is such an important like platform that I devote, like I didn't know it was. Like the normal people listen to long podcasts while they're like driving or they're doing things, and it was just like about it, like devotees needed to come onto that platform, and Wisdom of the Sages, like, you know, really went head into that platform and actually took over that whole yoga podcasting, whatever that subject. So I think that's an amazing, because I think we've been late on different things, like on the kirtan scene. We were late, you know, as devotees, we were late on that.
We dropped the kirtan ball there.
Yeah, but for wisdom, but for
fumbled
it
on the 20. You know, it's not even.
Yeah, but for this, you guys got in at the right time, and it's showing that the popularity and the way people are, you know, being introduced to Krishna consciousness through that is just fantastic.
You know, Nam, I'm going to just give you some props, because I was actually listening to your podcast and really appreciating it way before Wisdom of the Sages was happening. And I thought to myself, you know, this is so good, because everybody's got downtime. And you're going to put in your ears whatever you got. And, you know, if you're living in the temple, you know, you got to be careful what you put in your ears. But most people don't live in temples anymore. They just, okay, I'm going to listen to Audible and listen to audiobook, or they're going to listen to a radio or CDs or music. But to put these very positive, uplifting, inspirational, transformational, you know, heart-cracking, open information online, where people who in their downtime can binge listen to the Bhagavatam or binge listen to Hari Katha. This is so important. And it's so important for devotees to step up here. And as in the same way, it was hard to believe that there were no printing presses at one time. And that if you really wanted to learn sacred information, you go to a guru, they whisper it in your ear, then you go into your village and tell people. And then the Brihat Mridanga, the big, gigantic Mridanga came, which is the printing press. And now, wow, you can distribute a book. Everybody can have a book. You can each have a book in your own house. You don't have to go to a guru. The guru's in your house now. That was like so next level. Now it's like everything is in your smartphone. And we have an opportunity to make it a smartphone, a transcendental phone, or a demon phone, depending on what's coming out of it. Is today
I will tell you what mine is. This gives me just hearing, because we all kind of reach out to different demographics. Like our podcast, Arise, the Honest Men's podcast, was intended to target specifically men who are like religious or spiritual in orientation, and talk about the sensitive issues that intersect between like our humanity and our desire for transcendence, which no one wants to talk about because they're embarrassing, basically, at the heart of it. So we
want going to happen on this episode.
We going to go there?
Our very first episode was called "Am I a Bad Yogi Because I Like Porn?"
Right.
And so it was just like it was clickbaity.
What was the answer to that? That's the question we wanted.
The answer was no. Actually, Kishore Gopal was on there. We had Jamuna Bihari, Kishore Gopal, but I specifically remember Kishore Gopal speaking very brilliantly when answering that question directly. In any case, so that was our demographic. With Wisdom of the Sages, the demographic is like, as you're saying, like basically everyone. If you're in the gutter, I live there too. And you know what? I know about this bhakti thing. I'm going to bring you up. And also devotees as well, who also I know very much get so much nourishment from the Wisdom of the Sages podcast. And then Nam, your demographic is more like the devotee community.
Established devotees. Yeah, I don't suggest it to new devotees all the time, because sometimes I get scared, like for example, like I was thinking like maybe I should bring my guru on or something, you know, he'd do it and stuff, and then I'm thinking like someone who's maybe attracted to his and who's completely new, they come across like some other podcast that I did, which kind of brings forward a little bit of the maybe negative or things that we struggle with in our movement, then they might see that and be like, oh, I don't want to be a part of that, you know. So there's a real struggle there of like kind of a balance of how to do that, but in a smart way.
Man, you start asking private. You start asking the exact question that I wanted to ask.
By the way, another thing about podcasts is there's a lot of people who are interested in bhakti, but it takes a huge step to walk into a temple.
Yeah.
It's like it's confronting. It's like their ego, or they're just embarrassed or something. But anybody can just go on their phone, just hit that subscribe button, and then they're in. And I meet people like that all the time, like that. I listen to your podcast all the time. I was like, you're kidding. You live in, it's a guy I run into in a health food store in my neighborhood.
Wow.
It's quite fascinating that it's out. Well, you just put it out there, and then you no longer bring people to the temple. The temple's in their home. They just have to hit a button. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to get into this. Nam, you started talking about this, and I wanted to get into this the sort of struggles around the different podcasts that we're doing. Like, Nam, you started getting into that, and I also know, because you and I are close friends, that one thing that comes up a lot when doing any creative work, I feel like creators we're sensitive people, because it takes a lot to create something, just put it out there. And the one difficulty that probably comes up is criticism about what you do. And I'm kind of curious about how you process that. Like, with the Wisdom of the Sages, because your reach is very large, I suspect that, at least on occasion, you get that criticism of like deviation from the true essence of the Vedanta, or all sorts of crazy stuff that, people feel like genuinely feel, and maybe they don't mean it negatively, but they feel that like this is and I have to admit, personally, I struggle with this sometimes, where in order to be relatable, we have to pander to the common denominator. And so we lose something of, the essence of a teaching. For example, that criticism may come. And now, I know with one particular episode, you just had a title that someone didn't like. And they send you like a personal message. It's very just, I remember one time you put something up, like you genuinely wanted to hear about someone who was kind of lost faith and about that experience. And then someone, clapped back and said something really heavy. And you were like, you know what, I'm going to stop doing this podcast. And we were all like, no, we all came like, no, trying to encourage you. It's okay. Just let it go. It's not that big of a deal. And so I kind of wanted to hear about that element. How do you process like struggle? That's coming from outside. And then also like internal struggles, like keeping up with sadhana. I know with your podcast, you got it's the morning time, Wisdom of the Sages. And I think Kaustuba, you were talking to me once in New York, and you were like, yeah, I stopped my job at like noon after I finished all the stuff. For me, that's a struggle. That's another sort of struggle. So what are the sort of internal, external struggles you encounter with doing this sort of creative work? And how do you navigate that? That's my question.
Kaustuba, will you take it?
Oh, okay. First of all,
you to go first, Kaustuba.
First of all, what I'm actually if there's one thing that's really surprised me, is that we've had almost no criticism. I'm shocked.
Wow.
I'm really shocked.
I criticize other people, but no one criticizes us.
We've got a couple ones, and Raghunath has kind of brought them onto the show and played them out.
Well, they go to Apple Podcasts and they write a couple criticism, and then I blow them up and I take them apart because I can't.
But almost. Amongst the devotee community, I thought for sure there'd be a ton of. I was mentally preparing myself for it. Okay, there's going to be a ton of that. Almost none of it. And sometimes we get really nice encouragement from places that I would never expect it. So that hasn't been an issue for us somehow.
Oh, nice.
I think maybe the fact that on one hand we deal with things in a new or different, open kind of way, and on the other hand we're reading Prabhupada's purports and we're reading Prabhupada's verses, so it's kind of got a widespread kind of appeal in that sense. And then in terms of like sadhana, it's ultimately really great for our sadhana. Like our podcasts, it's somehow Krishna blessed me once we started doing it that I wake up very early every day without any effort, so I'm usually up by 3 latest. And I have an hour and a half to even if I'm preparing myself, a lot of it is reading like the verses that we're going to read that day and trying to prepare it. But a lot of times it's not even that. It's just like studying just to feel enlivened by it. So that when you're on the show, you feel enlivened. So that, and then that's got to be followed up by more research and all that. So it makes it so that we absorb our mind deep in this stuff for hours every day, and you have to, because you're on this what do they call those things, like treadmill. You're like on a treadmill and it just never stops, because you finish one and it's not like you can wait along the next day, the next one's coming up.
There's thousands of more verses waiting for us.
Yeah, so it's for me, it's been great for sadhana. And then in the afternoon I go chant my rounds and I feel good, so.
Wow. So no obstacles for you. Okay. So
one question there is there seem to be no like real external obstacles, no criticism, controversy, these kinds of things. Your sadhana is blessed, but like any endeavor, also there are human relationships involved, and so I'm wondering, do you Prabhus ever disagree about things? Do you ever have?
I just do whatever he says. It works out really easy.
We usually do it on the show. Like it plays out on the show.
Our disagreements, about if you listen to the show.
Yeah.
Well, that's a blessing, because you have to be super civil about it if it happens like live. But
I think part of teaching bhakti is you relate to devotees in a very gentle way, and there's obvious disagreements that come in any relationship, but devotees deal with it, or should deal with it, in a very, very unique way that inspires people in bhakti. And that's what made me fall in love with bhakti, is seeing devotees deal with joy, welcoming each other, serving each other, arguing with each other, deferring to each other. Yeah. Devotees do it in a different way. And if we do it in the Vaishnava way, we'll attract the whole world.
Beautiful.
That, I have to say, I really am super grateful to Raghunath, because what he's describing right there is what plays out. We do bump into things regularly, like we have different lifestyles, different needs, different opinions on things, and you're together on it every day and putting it out there every day, and somehow and Jai, you were mentioning earlier about something about our relationship, like that goes back, which I do feel is one of the most important ingredients in wisdom of the sages, is that people, it gives people joy to see people that love each other just talking with each other, and so that our relationship, it plays out on the show, but also behind the scenes. There's whenever those, I feel we're in a place in our relationship when those things come up that other people break relationships up on, or that become serious obstacles, we just get, we feel the tension, and then we get right over it, and that's a really wonderful thing. And
sometimes we have to talk about, it's a great point, because of course in any relationship, I was in a band or doing the podcast or in a marriage, if you don't work through things, they just come to an end, or you bury these emotions. But me and Kaustuba will get into it on the air, because I tend to be like all over the place. I take things off topic, say something offensive. Today we were talking about the analogy of, if you cut off your head, then you can't see yourself cutting off your head. It's an illusion. So I took that right to, man, think about all the thousands of millions of people who've got their heads cut off. And I just went down this strange road, historically lopping off heads. And then I started going, I wonder if it's a good way to die, getting your head lopped. I mean, it's over quick, it's no torture. And I just went down this insane path. And he's like, okay, we're going to bring it back to those 3 points I was making. And
I think I said, I don't think that's how Vidura reacted when my Trey brought up that analogy.
But we are just like two very different people, and we both have perhaps some, my eccentricity helps at 5 a.m. if it's hard for you to stay awake or something like that, because I'm definitely keeping you on your toes. Because we'll bring it back, and we have this, and it'll go back and forth like that. And there'll be some times where I just step on too many toes, and he'll just be bummed out, or I'll take up the whole conversation, or I feel like he will, or he shut me down and was rude. And then after the show, we got to get off. We got to we got to settle it out. Like, we got to settle like men. No, we got to just
do it regularly. You've got to say like men, honest.
Yeah,
men.
Honest men.
But actually, it's something that you got to work out like from time to time. It's like we go through that. So.
Nice.
But Raghu's awesome about that. I actually learned from him, how to do that better.
We have a principle called quick to apologize. Quick to apologize.
Beautiful.
Raghu, do you have any internal struggles that come up for you? Because we're hearing from Kaustuba, it's like kind of sounds like smooth sailing.
With criticism?
No, with just like doing the podcast, like maybe with Sadhana, with family, things that make it difficult for you to go up for the podcast.
There is the Easter egg hunt that's happening Sunday, which Kaustuba is trying to no big deal. Who cares about an Easter egg hunt? I was like, he don't have kids.
I woke up this morning.
What do you think Prabhupada would say about an Easter egg hunt? I was like, Prabhupada wouldn't care.
I woke up this morning and there was a message that Raghunath had sent me at 9:45 last night. I saw it at 3 this morning where Raghunath said, "Are we going to show on Easter? Because 8 a.m. is that's at Easter. That's Easter egg hunt time.
That's prime time Easter egg hunt." And he's like,
he was serious. He was serious. So I sent him. I was thinking of Nam, and I made a Prabhupada meme on the spot. And it had Prabhupada. He's sitting on a Vyasan, looking kind of stoic or quizzical. And
putting out his hands.
He's like, and it says, "What is this egg hunt?"
So yes, there's always things with family are going to come in. My family's been very tolerant and supportive. Sometimes they'll jump in on the show. Traveling sometimes. I travel a lot for my work, my teaching. I'm about to go to Nepal for 20 days, and that's going to be sort of challenging. Sometimes my band gets together, does a reunion. We go on tour, and we do it from at weird times in weird places in weird hotels or something like that. So there's those type of challenges. Internal struggles. I mean, I like to talk. I don't do anything else really good in this world, but I like to talk. So I can talk anywhere at any time. If there wasn't a podcast, I'd just be talking to anybody on the street.
Put a microphone in front of that guy.
So no, the only internal struggle is I think I'm pretty good with it. I do get a little bummed out if there's some people talking crap or criticism, but as far as the Hare Krishna community criticizing, I always felt like I'm off of the Hare Krishna radar. I've been off of the Hare Krishna radar for years. I don't think anyone's there's no person in the GBC tower thinking, that Raghunath is up to his tricks. I'm not even on their radar. And I'm okay with that. I feel like as long as you get blessings of Guru and the Vaishnavas, you're doing pretty good. And so I don't think people.
All right, now I would like to hear you. I know with you specifically, there have been sometimes challenges inside or coming from the outside that have really bummed you out.
Yeah, when I made that post, I got a little bummed because I was like,
what was that post?
It was about I said I want to interview someone that kind of lost faith in Krishna consciousness or who left Krishna consciousness just to see what their angle was. And then someone wrote something I can't exactly remember, but it was a little upsetting to me for some reason. And then I thought I was just questioning the whole thing. Should I be doing this? And even sometimes doing certain episodes, I was like, this is really weighing on my mind and I'm not able to, think about other things. And I was thinking maybe this is not what I should be doing because it's kind of just very taxing to my mind. So then I had to kind of extract myself and be a little bit detached from my own feelings and my own opinions and things and kind of just do the podcast for in a more unbiased and kind of neutral way to be because if you're doing it with a bias and if you're doing it with an agenda or something like that, then if things don't go your way, you're gonna kind of it's not gonna be good for your own self and it's gonna come out in the podcast that you don't agree or with it or whatever like that. So that's kind of been the external and sort of internal struggle. I mean, internally also I'm trying to get to 100 episodes by the end of the year. And it's like every weekend I'm trying to do a podcast, and I have a family. I have 2 little kids, I have a wife, and she's incredibly supportive. Like, yeah, you know, get to do your goal. But then when things get hard, she's like, I let you do the podcast every weekend, you know, so usually so she kind of uses it against me sometimes, but you know, bless her, she's very supportive. But the other thing I wanted to say was it's been a struggle now also to kind of proctor like or kind of like moderate who's going to be on the podcast, because I've gotten a lot of requests of like, oh, this person wants to come on, and this person wants to come on, and it's hard to say, well, I don't find that so interesting, or maybe, you know, I'll put you on the list or something like that. You know, I have to kind of say that, those kind of things sometimes. Oh, she's listening. Oh gosh. But yeah, now it's like I have to really think a lot about what the next topic is going to be, or the next guest, because if it's because now we have a lot of listeners, you know, like I kind of like, you know, sometimes 80 to 100 people listening each episode, and it's coming out every week. So I have to make it like engaging. I have to make it very interesting. I have to make like a clickbait title sometimes, and so that's a little bit of the struggle as well. But it's another thing. The last thing I want to say is like, just to keep it going. Like, that's why I admire Wisdom of the Sages. Like, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, again, this podcast the next week. It's like,
oh my God,
we're coming up on you. We're chasing you down.
I'm like not discussing Bhagavatam like you guys are, so it's like there's no like real rush there of like bhakti, but that is a struggle to keep it going. Like I'm at 51 episodes and I have to get to 100, and it's like sometimes it's like, oh my God, okay, here we go again. So.
I do that every week.
Yeah. You know, that's why I asked this question a little bit earlier about like, what is really your core intentional purpose, because Raghunath and Kaustuba Prabhus have, like, you know, they have the Bhagavatam as the backbone of their show. They have 18,000 verses to get through, you know.
Yes.
That's gonna take a while. That can justify, you know, 2 podcasts every day. But like for you specifically, like, what do you see as being the central theme of the late morning program? Also, just in listening to you, kind of like, you know, having the struggle of thinking like, okay, what's next? What am I going to talk about next? You know, like, and like perhaps thinking about having sort of like a spine of a particular theme that kind of makes that easier. Do you have that, or is it kind of like, because I've also noticed, Prabhuji, that you have quite a taste for controversy.
Yes, I do. I do. Yeah, to answer your question, it's a bit of the controversy part also was interesting to me, like to discuss those things because they're not really discussed. But also now I've begun to be like, okay, this is kind of like, I should make this a selfish thing too, in the sense of like this last episode I did with Govardhan Das, and he was talking about how he left Krishna consciousness for 10 years and then he came back and he's now like this. And I was thinking, this is just so inspiring to me personally, having this conversation. And like, I don't care. And some devotees were like, why is your podcast 2 hours long? That's too long. I can't listen to the whole thing. And I was like, and then I was thinking about them and I was thinking, I don't care if you can't listen to the whole thing. I'm getting personally so much out of this, like out of this devotee's story. I'm getting so much out of this devotee's story that I'll just keep doing this because it's inspiring me personally, you know? So in that way, that could kind of be sort of the, you know, the theme or kind of what I'm going for, but it's evolved into something else now, that it's like a selfish thing to inspire my own bhakti, and also and I've got messages from other devotees like, wow, that was great, and you should do more of those stories and things. So I don't know.
I just want to say that echoes what we heard earlier from Raghu, actually, about students being kind of one category, then sort of estranged persons being like another tier. And he said, but ultimately for myself, you know,
right.
I need to do sadhana. I know Raghu actually has to go very soon because he was only able to stay an hour. So I really want to get to the last of my 2 questions that I have left. I'll save the finance part for the last question, since Kaustuba already gave us a little bit of delineation of the strategy, and I really want to get into that a little bit more. But responsibility of your platform. Now, as some of you may have seen, last couple of weeks, I've been a little bit trigger heavy on the memes on my Facebook page, and one of the responses that I got from an old friend of mine from Chicago was that I was misusing my platform. And, because people hear from you, they take you seriously. Now, in my view at the time was that, everyone who's on Facebook already has their own views about things. It doesn't matter. I'm just having a little laugh. But he says, no, people take you seriously. You can sway them in a particular direction. You have to use your platform responsibly. Of course, at the time, I said, well, if people are really interested in what I'm saying, I am skeptical about things, so I'm going to use my platform to express my skepticism. But it did get me thinking about that subject matter a lot more, about the weight of responsibility as your voice becomes more meaningful to more people. And navigating that sort of weight of responsibility. Like before, it's kind of like, yeah, we're just having fun. Let's just have a conversation. But as you start to your voice is getting amplified in the hearts of people, then it's like, whoa, should I say this? Should I not say this? How much can I actually express a particular conviction in this particular way? So I'm kind of fascinated with this question, like, how do you deal with the weight of responsibility as your voices are being amplified? Or is it not even attention at all for you?
You want to take a Raghu?
I think
because Raghu is going to have to go.
Yeah.
It's a great question, I think. I think anybody who becomes a parent, they start to realize that I have to give up an old incarnation of myself. Because once you become a parent, you're setting an example for the kids. You're setting an example for what you eat, for how you react to stress or loss, or when you get upset, how do you react to that? So once you have dependents looking towards you, because we don't live in a bubble, everything I do is like a ripple effect that affects everybody who loves me or everybody who looks up to me, then you start to sort of, for me, that was the biggest game changer in my life is being a parent. And of course, and I was always a singer of a band, I had some responsibility as well in a public way. But for sure, there's some important responsibilities we have as leaders of platforms where we have a voice and in our behavior, in our actions, especially in our dealings with other devotees, because sometimes we could bring up things like what I think what Nam's done with his podcast, it's like moving the Hare Krishna movement like light years ahead of time, because they're touching on these very, very important issues that need to be talked about and vented and worked out. We don't do that so much. We go through the Bhagavatam. We're a little bit more straight and narrow somehow. But his is a necessity, I think. The danger with going there is if people don't know the appropriate behavior for discussing things, it can get to be like a nasty war on the comment section where people, and this is a huge thing, where you've invested years in chanting japa, invested years in studying sacred literature, invested years in self-control and self-discipline, and you blow it with one offensive statement. And that's how much you can pull the last straw that breaks the camel's back. You say one little thing and you've ruined all your spiritual contribution, that spiritual bank account, just because the dollar drops. It's your bank, it's Confederate money now. It's not where all that investment is over. And so it has to be really, really delicate in how you lead people and how to speak and how to think and how to behave. And it's super important as leaders to never commit Vaishnava aparad and set by example in ways in dealings with other people. Because people are going to come after us. So I naturally want to, go after them, and I have to be careful with that,
Thank you.
Yeah, along that same point, I am creating that platform for people to, potentially be offensive, and that weighs on my mind a little.
I think you just state it. Just state it. Hey, this is something important. Be careful how you talk about this.
Yeah.
I've just what Raghunath did right now. He does commonly on our show, very commonly, and it's real important. I think it's one of just, almost not, I don't want to say like entirely lost, but to much too far degree lost is the idea, you know, that we practice, we do our sadhana, we chant our rounds, we do our kirtans, we do whatever we do. But, you know, Jagai and Madai were saved because they didn't offend the devotees. You know, they weren't sadhakas or this or that. And, you know, that point is driven so home, especially through Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know, Chaitanya Bhagavat, you know, that you just screw everything up. And somehow we always are feeling there's a justification for it, or, you know. So Raghunath really kind of is kind of a guard dog on that. And by sharing the depth of his realizations on that, like again and again and again, it has a purifying effect on the show itself. And I think in one sense, by focusing on that, that is one of the most important responsibilities. You know, for Nam particularly, because his thing does deal with controversy quite a bit, and you know, and he takes up issues that people have strong opinions on and that are really important to people. That becomes a real important responsibility.
I don't, to answer the question, yours, Jai Jagannath, I don't know if I've completely understood how to navigate it yet, but I know one thing is that I have to try to keep my own opinions a little bit separate, just so, because you know, it's like an interviewing, like someone sent me like books about interviewing and like and how it's actually a skill of interviewing and how to extract information from people without putting your own spin on it or your own motivations or things like that. So that's been something that I've been trying to work on, and the responsibility is definitely there, like to not create a platform for people to be offensive, but I don't want to actually shy away from things either, because I think it's an important thing to discuss certain topics, but you know, as Raghunath Prabhu said, to do it in a way that's responsible, and I'm still trying to understand how to do that. And lately, I haven't been going into the controversial things. Like I want to do one about the COVID vaccine or something, you know. But I'm trying to tread very carefully because it's incredibly polarizing in our movement about, you know, people are for it, people are against it, and things like that. But I want to bring that out, and I want people to have a platform to hear from both sides. So
it's amazing. Once you get triggered like that, you want to resort to bad habits of I'm right, you're wrong. There's one way to do it, and it sets up a breeding ground. I think it should also be discussed, but it takes so much inner work to even suppose I'm pro-vax or anti-vax, to inner work to state your position without being offensive, and then on the other side, for you to hold that space and not go there, and then not encourage all the people chiming in. Because then it becomes one of those. I mean, I grew up in the ISKCON era where there was like these websites that just hated the Hare Krishna movement, or they were like splinter groups who hated, and it was just like a nasty, what were those chat boards, and you go on there and you just get sucked in there, and it's just like, okay, here comes the Vaishnav Aparad machine gun, and it's just like horrible. You'll go out of there. What have I just done to my spiritual life? I was a brahmachari for 6 years. I just shot it down in one binge bender. On that.
I think why be a martyr for that sometimes? I think why be a martyr?
So I don't even, my answer is I don't go there. I don't feel like I'm even that qualified to go there. I do think it should be discussed, and I'm glad you're doing it. but I'm like scared to go there for my own. Me and Kaustuba got in a heated debate yesterday just on the phone. And I was just thinking,
it wasn't heated though. It wasn't heated. It was intense.
But you got to be careful not to go to Vaishnav Aparad. It's not worth it, because who knows who's right anyway about this stuff? We're just speculating and joking.
Also, about Vaishnav Aparad, I think it's sometimes things that are we think that are Vaishnav Aparad are not Vaishnav Aparad, like just stating your opinion in a kind way, or even
just matter of factly.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely a fine line between those things.
I because you guys are bringing up the offensive element to this question. One thing that has been difficult for me in the Hare Krishna movement specifically is that before I was a devotee, if you like disagree with someone, it was just a disagreement. In the Hare Krishna movement, if you disagree with someone, and especially if it's an operatic, and you're be devastated. And it's just like whoa, like, and like I'm obviously a person that doesn't shy away from controversy, but when I respond to comments or something like that, I mean, if you see how I respond to comments, I'm very respectful. I don't call people names, but I stand my ground very strongly on certain things. Of course, my initial thing that gets conversations going, I be treading a little bit dangerous waters. I ain't gonna lie. I gotta work on that. Ownership for that. I need to fully work on that. I'm like getting into that little sensitive area. But when it comes to like responding to people who get, let's say, triggered about something, I'm like very conscientious, like how I'm responding. Make sure not to use words. Make sure not to call people names. Make sure, this and that. Like I try to be very conscientious about that. But it's still, especially when you do it through an impersonal media, it still sounds like opera because people are hearing things in the voice of their own mind and how their own mind is taking them. And so, and that happens, whether it's media, it also happens in person. You may say things like in a sort of quote proper way, but it still gets translated in the machinery of another person's mind. So because you're bringing this offensive element in, sometimes I wonder about that in the Hare Krishna movement. It seems like every time there's something sensitive, and you happen to be on the quote wrong side of a sensitive topic, then you're an operatic, and you shouldn't even go there because it's just too triggering and so on. And that makes me feel like, well, I question my own integrity or authenticity if I'm not allowed to express something, even matter-of-factly, even respectfully, because it's going to be misconstrued or. So what would be your reply to something like that? It's something I have personally struggled with in the Hare Krishna movement. I'm like, man, you can't say nothing up in here without being blasted. Like, you literally can't say anything before getting called out for this.
Just one quick in here is just like, on our podcast specifically, like similar to what Namarasa Prabhu does, is that, we've also addressed a few quite kind of controversial or sensitive subject matters. And my personal approach to that is and I feel like this is kind of the most foolproof way of dealing with controversy in a public sense, is to really try to get people to bring out their personal experience. Like, how have I been impacted by this very subjectively? Right. And to bring that to light and to get others who are listening, to get the audience to really empathize with that person's experience. Because it's like, no one can criticize you for having the experience that you've had. It doesn't matter what it's about. Like, your experience is your own. And as long as you're claiming that for yourself and not necessarily by your experience saying how other people should be experiencing something, or like kind of putting it on them and generally steering clear from value judgments, I feel like it can be a safe thing, just like focus on subjective experience as opposed to like opinions on how something should be objectively, because that's just a recipe for.
That's a nice point.
Yeah.
Some wisdom on this from Raghu Kaustuba. I mean, thank you for still being here, Raghu. If you have to leave at any time, please feel free to bounce out.
It's a great time to split.
I gotta go. I gotta go too. Actually, I forgot. I had something I had to do.
I have a meeting now. Can I tell you guys?
It really depends on what you're. Like you guys were saying, things have to be called out. We don't want to stick our head in the sand, especially if I'm running a project. Someone's acting inappropriate. Things have to be called out. There's a difference between calling something out and indulging in a person's shortcomings. for feeling some genuine pleasure out of For example, suppose suppose there's a person staying in my community, they're doing something wrong, and I feel like I have to say to other people in the community what this person is doing is wrong. That's not an aparad. It's going to affect me. It's going to affect my family. It's going to affect your family. What that person is doing, you got to call them out. But to go on with that and then do nothing about it, but to go on with that and say, and almost say, yeah, do you see what this guy's doing? Yeah, he's doing, and just getting into a banter of almost enjoying that person's discomfort or that person's shortcomings or that person's aparad. There's even people who've done heinous things, real heinous things. I'm a devotee. I'm in the job of forgiving, but heinous people are not allowed in my community. If you commit criminal activities, and people have done it in not just the Hare Krishna movement, in Catholic Church, people have done things like child molestation and things like that. What is our mood of devotees? Well, I'm not a politician. I'm not the governor. I'm not a cop. But whatever it is, they're no longer welcome in the community. As a devotee, I have to react in another way too. That doesn't mean that person shouldn't get punished for the crime. They could go to jail. They could get the death penalty. Who knows? Whatever the law of the land is. But in my eyes, is that they're not allowed within this community anymore to become a leader. They have to become outside of that community. And they say, well, what about the what's the verse? Kaustuba, 9th chapter. Even one commits the most abominable activities, they're considered a sadhu. So you minister them like a prison ministry. You minister them away from the community. You don't say, well, I'm just going to forgive. Forgiveness doesn't mean we're foolish and let people back into our life that are regularly committing criminal activities or they're psychologically deplorable. It means we learn to respect maybe at a distance. So I'm saying to indulge in this aparad. It's one thing to call it out. And whenever you're running a project, you got to call it out. Whenever you're running a family or communities of families, you got to call stuff out. I think that's very, very natural and healthy.
Thank you for that distinction, Kaustuba. You have some, extra words of wisdom on this?
Not my words, but Krishna's words. That what makes one dear to him is one who's a kind friend to everyone and one who puts no one into difficulty. And so I think as Vaishnavas, the deep Vaishnavas, that actually have deeply internalized that, they are kind of moving through the world gently, and they may call something out, but even when they're calling it out, they're concerned about the heart of that other person. They're concerned about, so they can, the person that's got that kind of depth of sensitivity to another person, that's not quick to, even though there's reason to criticize what they've said or pick apart what they've said, or but that really will, because their desires to please Krishna, they're going to do it in such a way where they don't harm that person, where they don't cause pain to that person. That's the level that we're trying to rise to.
Kaustuba is so right on. He said what I said in a long-winded way. He said in a moment. You're a genius, man. You deeply internalize this stuff. The point
got me warmed up.
The point is, for a devotee, even when we call stuff out, we ultimately care for their benefit. We eat because we're devotees. We practice Krishna consciousness. That means ultimately, I want that person, no matter what deplorable thing they did, or horrible thing they did, or aparad, or offensive thing, we want them to go higher. We don't want to condemn them for eternally to hell. We want them to resurrect their spiritual life, because we know in a moment, hey, we're subject to Maya. And once we start thinking I'm not, that's where trouble starts. So there's this delicate balance between justice and mercy.
I like what Kaustuba Prabhu said about moving the higher devotees. They move through the world very gently. I like that a lot.
Someone will always counter with, Bhaktisiddhanta said this and did that or something like that. But I think there's truth in that. But people highlight those aspects of, people say Prabhupada was criticizing his God, but he gave one speech at one, in one Vyasa Puja, and in a couple places in his book, because there was a necessity for him to do it. He felt a necessity for him to say these things, but most of us aren't in a position where there's such a necessity for us to be, being brash, or whatever.
I'm sorry. I want to just one other thing in this part of the conversation. Don't mind. Okay. The responsibility that we're talking about is a responsibility of how we use our language, our speech, because it's a podcast. That's the responsibility we're talking about.
Yeah.
And in the Gita, Krishna is mentioning 5 elements of austere speech, which, I guess being responsible with our speech is to be austere with it. And Krishna is mentioning 5 elements. The first one, it should be truth.
Yeah.
And the second being, it should be beneficial. And priya, and it should be pleasing. Now, I always find that other two, Anuvega Karam, it should not be agitating to others. I gotta work on that. I really have to work on that, honestly. And the 5th one is, it should be based on Shastra, Swadhyaya. I was gonna ask, I'm just gonna conveniently forget about that Anuvega Karam part right now. It's there, I acknowledge. But the tension between Satya and Priyahitam, that it is truthful, but it's also pleasing and beneficial. But it seems that in the material world, things that are true can very much be at odds with our conception of what is pleasing and beneficial. Mm-hmm. And it seems when it comes to a lot of these sensitive conversations, that's where the tension is coming up, at least in my observation of it. And my observation means I try to always give the benefit of the doubt to everyone in the conversation, that they're honest and they're coming from a place of care. Like, I never make the criticism that you lack empathy or you lack compassion. Like, I think that's nasty to just assume that about someone. So I just giving the best common denominator. We're all coming from we want to benefit. But oftentimes in this world, truth and what is our conception of pleasing and beneficial can be at odds. And therefore, even if the truth is said in the most pleasing way, if you have another concept of what pleasing and beneficial is, you're not going to hear it that way. And I feel like the reason devotees, or just people in general, keep pressing each other is because they're thinking, I'm speaking the truth. And even if I were to say this in the most pleasing way, it would still be taken in some other way because people's concepts are different. And therefore, I'm just going to stand my ground and say what I got to say. And I'll still, let's say, again, giving the benefit of the doubt, I would do that as respectfully as possible, but I have to have the courage to take a stand here. And I can't just, even if it's received in another way. So it really literally is the same question, but I'm just bringing in this extra element that you're dealing with minds that are suffering from the reversal from truth. That's literally the meaning of avidya. It's a reversal of the true knowledge. So same question, but I'm just bringing in this element. How would you respond to this? I'm asking for your wisdom here. Obviously, this particular question is a little bit personal for me, I guess, because I'm trying to keep my heart open right now. Yeah. Normally, I'm like, normally that's how I'm like, exactly, take the key and throw it in the ocean. But honestly, right now, I'm trying to be real open with my heart right here and really hear what you're trying to say to me in this moment around this issue, which is something that I will personally probably struggle with or deal with a lot because I am a person that speaks and usually gets a lot of platform in this particular way. So how are you going to advise me with this thing? And I'm asking a very, I think it's a very good question. And it's a true tension. It's not just a justification to be a jerk. What is your wisdom?
In my opinion, I would say I'm beginning to realize that it's not worth it to sometimes talk about things or say things online or have Facebook wars or whatever with and try to kind of navigate that satyam priyam hitam thing, that sometimes it's not even worth it just to for your own spiritual life to engage in that way, because it will affect you in ways that you don't know, and even in ways that you do know, it will affect you. So do you want to martyr yourself by doing that? Sometimes I'm asking myself that. I don't know. And as the more time goes on, the more I'm like, this is not worth it. I don't know. That's just the way I feel about things
I'm feeling you on that.
lately. I know we have this conversation all the time, you know, but
Raghu, you look very pensive and heart is so open.
What's
bro.
gonna come?
knows.
What's churning in there? It's churning.
Yeah, I'm not being humble here. I don't consider myself so intelligent. I think these are like intelligent people have to really think about these things. I just stay on the side of caution. It's like there's thin ice. I'm not going to walk on the thin ice. I'm not qualified to walk on the thin ice. There are people, I think, that are. The problem is we have a bunch of people who are not qualified to walk on thin ice, walking on thin ice, saying this is how it should be. And what happens is they create huge waves, and they can wreck an entire devotional community. And I think I really truly believe, and I'm not being humble. I know I'm not that bright, and I try to tell people, and they say, "No, you are." And I say, "Listen, I'm being honest here. I'm not." And so I just shy back, and I if I have some opinions within my household, I'll give that opinion. Within my community, I'll give some opinion. But I'm careful, and I'm careful not
Raghunath
to.
Prabhu,
Yeah.
what does qualify a person to walk on thin ice? Who should be speaking about these things?
It's quite it's quite amazing.
Nice question. We're all speechless.
I don't know. See, you asked the dumb guy, remember? I'm going to ask the dumb guy the hardest question. Let's see how dumb he is. Let's see if I can make a joke. Yep, we got him. His tongue's hanging out of his mouth. We got him now.
Kaustuba Prabhu, do you have any wisdom on this?
Do the Kaustuba, my better half.
You know, I really appreciate what everybody's saying. I really appreciate, you know, Jai coming forward, you know, real honestly, vulnerably. And, you know, what Nam was saying, it touched on something that, like, within the past couple years of my life has been kind of like, you know, like Raghunath and I, we're getting like old now, you know. It's like we're in our mid 50s. It's like, you know, we've been around for a little while. We've been practicing this for a while. Hopefully you're going to understand things a little bit more deeply, you know. And if I've had any blessings from the great souls, you know, I feel this rising in me. Like, you look at a verse like Trinadapi, right? Which is a verse it's, you know, the previous verse is saying this holy name is like all powerful. It's like just its power is unlimited. Unfortunately, I have no taste for it. And so it means that I don't have, my mind is so distracted by so many petty, unimportant things that it has no taste for the holy name. This is a ridiculous, you know, pitiful condition that I'm in. But then the next verse, okay, well, you know, if you can be humble, if you can be tolerant, if you're not concerned about receiving any kind of respect, and if you're very respectful to others, then you won't martyr yourself, right? You won't kill your own spiritual life. You'll be able to, you know, absorb your mind always in the holy name. So, yeah, you know, one reason why we want to be like super careful is because we need to make that connection. The reason why I pick up my beads and I get nothing out of it, I get no taste out of it, I get no hair standing on end, I get no powerful transformation, is because of this. I just have to look at Trinadapi, this verse, and understand this is why I'm not getting it. Either I'm not tolerant enough, I'm not, you know, humble enough, I'm not respectful enough. I haven't let go of the petty idea that I'm going to find some kind of happiness out of being shown respect. That's why I'm not. That's why my practice is just kind of like sort of working. You know, like the power of the holy name and stuff. It's like it's being sprinkled on me, but I need to be like, you know, dunked and held under and drown in it know. So yeah, you know, who's qualified is someone that's got deep realization of that, and it's showing through. You know, who's qualified to walk on the thin ice is that person who has deep realization, deep taste for the holy name, you know, and who's got, you know. And another thing that I focus on a lot as I get older now too is this realization that the Paramatma is in my heart, the Paramatma is in your heart, you know, like that. When I'm battling with someone, there's a disconnect between me and them, but for those realized souls, there's no disconnect, because we're all connected by this part. The right in my heart is Paramatma sitting right in your heart too, witnessing everything, waiting for both of us to kind of mature, looking at us, battling each other over an insignificant, ultimately a very insignificant issue. You know, it's risen up, you know, whatever that might be, you know, whatever. And I always, you know, for one reason that Raghunath and we get over, if we do run into bumps, we easily get over them, because we both have, even though we're very different people, in many ways we're very similar. In many ways our background is very similar, and in many ways it's our personalities are very different. But one thing that we really hold in common is that we both treasure something in a very similar way, and that's our relationship with Srila Raghunath Swami. Like we both have a very similar kind of feelings and appreciation, and we are both trying to allow our spiritual life and our minds and our behavior to be refined by him. And I feel like with questions like this, like that, your very important, sincere question, like I would be hopeless to have anything to say or any realization of it without his example. I would justify every time my lower nature would come up, I'd find a way to rationalize it if it wasn't for his example. And so that, you know, that who's qualified to walk on that thin ice is someone who really does see the equality of every living being, someone who is really concerned to try not to harm another. And that's ahimsa, like real ahimsa, you know, like to not harm another living entity. And someone who's deeply concerned with that all of their body, mind, and words are pleasing to Krishna. That person is going to be able to fight those, you know, to not fight those battles, but in other words, to enter into that conflict and do it in a way that's going to be uplifting rather than
condemning or
not condemning. I was going to say rather than like shattering the unity of the Vaishnavas and weakening our sangha and weakening our potency. You know.
Wow, isn't that beautiful?
That's
beautiful. That could be like a pamphlet. I'd buy that pamphlet from you.
I the minds of the devotees.
I could try to sell it.
I gotta leave.
I gotta go too. I actually have a meeting.
Okay.
Are you serious now?
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm working.
Kaustuba, you're on your own, man. We love you. You did a great job so far. Carry them through. Take them back home.
Okay, I only had a last question about finances, so you guys can. You have to go, so you have to go. We can take this last question with Kaustuba. I think
Kaustuba. We argue about finances all the time.
We do.
I think it is an important.
I also have a follow-up question for Kaustuba Prabhu that I have to ask. But Namarasa Prabhu, Raghunath Prabhu, if you have to go, please, we won't keep you. Thank you so much for joining us. Vancha Kalpas.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
I really hope we can speak again in a similar way.
Yes.
Keep up the good work, you guys. It's inspirational. Really
check out my podcast, www.latemorning.show.
We're there. The number one Hare Krishna podcast out there.
Podcast.
And if you want a close second, you check out Wisdom of the Sages.
Number one yoga podcast. Don't mix those.
That's right. Yeah, we're the number one yoga podcast.
Yes.
I almost made a meme for you with our sadhu logo guy saying like, what is your criteria, Namras?
What is the metric of your number oneness?
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thanks, you guys.
Hari.
I will.
Yeah, I just have this one question about the finances because I think it's an important piece to this thing.
I'm I'm so sorry to cut you there, but like there is one question that I must just follow up with Kaustuba Prabhu on what he just said. And Kaustuba Prabhu, it essentially comes down to this, right? Like your core point is that what qualifies one to walk on thin ice is really like embodying the Trinadapi mood and very, very deeply having that as your core internal compass. But one thing is that such personalities, being as humble as they are, generally would not necessarily speak unless they're asked to speak. And my concern is that there may be certain subject matters that have to be addressed in our society that no one wants to speak about, and certainly wouldn't speak about like out of their own accord unless they're asked. So like how do we kind of deal with that? Like who should be taking it upon themselves to bring such things to light? For instance, and I'll just put this out there now, is that we are dealing not only in the wider society, but also in our Krishna conscious society with a very serious sexual malaise. Like devotees are struggling in many ways sexually, and it's so touchy, and no one wants to talk about it, and everyone just keeps sweeping it underneath the carpet. And so, but that can't carry on. These things have to be addressed. So my question to you is, do you agree? Should these things be discussed? Should they be discussed publicly? And who should be taking that upon themselves?
Or if the guy who's Trinada P is the only one who's really qualified to do it in a way that it doesn't like break the community, then the natural conclusion is like, well, let's just not talk about it. And then that also breaks the community.
Well, I'm seeing two different categories of discussion. One was like controversial issues that devotees are polarized on. That's like kind of one thing, right? Where there's tension and we see that things are getting heated and so on. And then another thing is like these very sensitive topics that are very personal and maybe not controversial in the same way.
Right, true.
And so the first one, I was saying that to the extent that we're Trinada P, to the extent that it's going to be beneficial. Let's put it that way. Right. And with the second one, I admire, like Jai, what I saw you doing at the Bhakti Center, now what you're carrying on here in terms of this podcast. And I think it's super important. And it's also one of the biggest realizations that Raghunath and I got through doing Wisdom of the Sages, is that first of all, it's like we recognized ourselves that I spoke about this a little bit on Nam's podcast, but that I think it's ingrained, it has to some degree within the Krishna consciousness movement been ingrained, the idea that when we present Krishna consciousness, when we present bhakti, it should be done in a what Chaitanya Charan described as a vertical kind of path. I'm sitting here on the Vyasasan, and I'm wearing the garland, and being shown the respect. And you're sitting down here. I know more than you, and I have deeper spiritual realizations, and I present them to you. You show me a certain level of respect, and that's the channel that, in one sense, there's kind of a truth to that, but on a practical level, particularly as an entry point, it can be not so effective. But when someone speaks, and this is also consistent with our philosophy, though, when someone speaks from on a horizontal platform, I'm just like you. I'm a victim of Kali Yuga. I'm a perfect example of a person that's, my mind is always disturbed. I'm unlucky. I'm misguided. I'm just like you, and my life choices have reflected that. Then you get then you're at a place where you can open up about these things. And I don't think, again, obviously, the more that we're embodying that Trinadapi mentality, the more that Krishna's grace will flow through us. But I think on that level, just people that care about each other, if people just genuinely care, and if people can feel that, people open up from what I've seen, because we also have this Bhakti recovery group, we get stuff like literally the Bhakti recovery group saved my life. I was going to commit suicide on Christmas Day, and I called the suicide hotline, and nobody answered. And then I just, and then on the Bhakti recovery group WhatsApp thread, I just shared that I'm going to kill myself today. And then those people came to my rescue. And now a few months have passed, and I'm feeling encouragement in life again. And this, when devotees really care about one another, they can open up and discuss these really difficult things that are difficult to discuss. And I think that we've seen that the model of the 12-step model, which involves, a level of humility. I've got a big problem, for sure. I've tried to deny it. Now I can't deny it anymore. And then having someone that you can open up, someone who's can understand your problem and you can really open up to, and depending on the higher power, and being willing to do the hard work to kind of rectify, the damage that's been done through it, and so on. That kind of stuff is really, really, really powerful. And I've also I've shared this on Nam's thing, I think, too, or certainly on Wisdom of the Sages. But I have one friend who, when we were kids, we were friends when we were kids. Like, I met her when she was 13 and I was 15. And then I went like 30 years without seeing her. And she had been through heroin addiction and, so much struggle. And then we reconnected over Facebook. And at a certain point, she started reaching out saying, I've met devotees, I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, and, can I talk to you? And we reconnected. And she had been through the 12 steps, and, with a lot of, sincerity and, desperation, and the intensity, she said to me, I feel like I've wasted all this time. This time we were friends, and then you've spent all this time practicing bhakti, learning, serving, and I, went down this horrible path, and now we come together, and you've got all this background, and I wasted all that time. And but I said to her, well, somehow we're at the same place right now, because your intensity to practice bhakti it's surpassing mine, and I was introducing her to Raghunath Swami, and I was saying, when she speaks, sometimes it sounds like the prayers of the Bhagavatam, the total humility and the total focus, like the total the completeness of, like, I want this and nothing else. That place where we're meant to come, which we don't necessarily come to 30 years in the brahmacharya ashram and the sannyasa. You don't necessarily get that, Somehow she was there. And Raghunath Swami said, well, these 12 steps, this is not, like he said, this is a very, very potent path to walk. It's for real. It's real transformation. So just to get back to the original question, I think that it's really important that we do have these conversations. We shouldn't shy away from them. It needs the right forums, for sure. And I think devotees like yourselves, what you're doing, it needs to spread. It's spreading on Wisdom of the Sages, that bhakti. We got about, last I heard, and that was maybe a month or two ago, was like over 65 people participating in it. And what we find is that everywhere you turn, people have those kind of problems, whether it be, alcohol or drugs, or pornography, or sexual issues, or whatever, and a list of other, a list of other kind of addictive problems. It's so widespread. You know, this person is now heading up, you know, our one of the people heading up our recovery group. And she says sometimes devotees say to her, why do you need to have this? It's like, isn't it that we chant, and that's what we do. But this is so that we can chant, you know, this is so that we can get to that place, you know, so people really do need it. Devotees don't, maybe it's a new thing that's rising, but whether it's exactly 12 steps or but the point is, Dadati, it's like opening one's mind and sharing with another. And that is core, to our, what is it? Guya Makiti Prichati, right? That is core to the practice of bhakti. That's what it is. That's in the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I am fallen. I need the mercy of a Vaishnava. Help me. It's like, that's how I see those kind of conversations. So I think a lot of people have to, it's almost like, how could a temple not have that? How could any community not have that outlet? I think, I think if devotees like yourselves and devotees like that are doing our Bhakti Recovery Group, if they can show this, then it can do a lot to people talk about why people go away, or this is part of it. I'm embarrassed, or I was never able to deal with my issue that I had to deal with because I didn't feel there was any forum where I could talk about it.
Wow.
Your sound vibration is so pleasing. I just want to say that.
Your sound vibration is always pleasing.
It just sounds like so caring. It's very moving just to hear the vibration of it. So,
thank you.
Raghunath
and I are learning a lot from doing this. We're really learning a lot. From our community, from the Wisdom of Sages community, we're learning a lot.
That's incredible.
We're just very fortunate to get a few drops of the distilled essence of that realization. So thank you. Thank you, Prabhu.
This is the last thing I have, and I just wanted to get to it because I do think it's important. And it's a sort of a financial element to podcasts, and you sort of briefed on a little strategy that you guys have articulated for doing that. And I kind of want to just hear a little bit more about that. But just as a general point is that, it's just like, well, we're just guys having a conversation. Why should anyone give anything for that? And I think particularly when it comes to spiritual stuff, people tend to feel more entitled to it. Like in other words, we're prepared to spend any amount of money on any BS out there with pleasure. But when it comes to spiritual things, it should be free. And just having the experience of distributing books and meeting so many people on the street, like, oh, this is a spiritual book. Why aren't you giving it to me? And it was just like, no, you need to give a donation. Well, it's spiritual. If you're really spiritual, it should be free. So it's kind of you have that sort of element, but somehow you've been able to navigate that and get people to participate. I mean, they're obviously getting value from you and they want to reciprocate. And usually monetary reciprocation is a very practical way it can be done. So I kind of just wanted to hear about that, maybe a little bit about that tension of having to like, hey guys, like, how did you do that? Give money or, and then how did you develop that?
The way it started was after a couple months in, we started the Patreon thing, which I thought was great because, like even prior, like when I teach, I kind of leave it up to the person to pay me whatever they want. Like if I do lots of yoga teacher trainings and stuff, and I don't have like a set fee. It's like whatever they give me, I'll accept. I'm happy. I'd probably do it for free, in many cases. And so if they're going to give me something, okay, great. And Patreon allowed us to say, give whatever you want, if you like, if this has some value to you, give whatever you want. And I'll be honest with you, we're still kind of fine tuning our Patreon experience because we did a survey, at the end of the year last year, just to try to understand, we allow people to come in on any level they want. Half of our people come in at $1, so it's like the minimum.
Right.
And for that, they get like this practically what they get is they can enter our Discord threads where there's like lots of conversations and stuff being shared. Raghunath and I had intended to participate more there, but honestly, we don't participate very much there. They get different courses or classes that we teach. Sometimes we've been giving more or less, but you know, and that's about it. And we asked like, why did you join Patreon? And the biggest reason was because they enjoy the podcast and they just want to give back, right? It's like if I give you guys, you know, $10 a month, what is that per? That's 30 cents. That's like practically like a quarter for podcasts. You guys put out an hour-long podcast, and it's like I'm dropping a quarter into the thing, something like that, you know. So that's the biggest reason, and the second biggest reason was the courses that he and I teach ourselves. So we're trying to satisfy both of those needs as much as possible. So Raghunath, he does like, he calls it Sweet Baby Krishna, you know, like usually once a week he'll do like a Krishna book storytelling kind of thing, or I'll teach some course or something like that. So we do that. But you know, I like the idea that people can give whatever they want, because I feel like we were keeping on the Brahminical level that way. People want to give some dakshin for it, you give some dakshin. You're saying that people don't that I get it, like devotees feel like it's
yeah, devotees or people in general, there's just like a sense that if it's spiritual, I'm entitled to that.
Yeah,
I don't know, it's just a thing that I observed definitely in our devotee community, but otherwise also I just see it outside also.
So a lot of people that give aren't like quote unquote devotees in that sense, like they haven't been
conditioned in that way.
Yeah, they haven't been conditioned in that way. They're conditioned.
Education is free in ISKCON culture.
Yeah, they're conditioned by another culture where you do give for those things, I suppose. And another maybe the devotees that give, they're more giving from like, a lot of times we hear from devotees like, we appreciate what you're doing. So they may be giving like the way someone gives to a temple or something like it's my duty to give to Krishna, give back to Krishna some way. And I really like this form, so let me give to this. So I think we get that kind of donations too.
Yeah, I think that's all I have. It's interesting. And part of the reason why I did bring this up is because I've seen Namarasa do like you've seen it also, I can imagine, like a GoFundMe sort of thing, or
for his podcast, to get equipment and stuff like that.
Yeah, to get equipment or things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, it just occurred to me that, I mean, Namarasa, as Karuna said in the beginning, he's like the archetypical popular kid. I think that's very true. And whenever I've seen him do any GoFundMe thing, like literally with like less than an hour or two, like he's got what he needs, you know? But it had me wondering, observing that, if like, you know, he's a family man and he takes a lot of time to do these things. And of course he has his job, which is working, but maybe he may need it would have been nice to ask him about this, but compensation in other ways, if he's to continue this in a quality way, and if he wants to also increase the quality, because there's something, I mean, it's weird. Like if we're on the high level of devotional awareness, then okay, I'm gonna put my heart into it no matter what comes. That's kind of the mood, you know?
Yeah.
But just when you're dealing with a more conditioned mind, I apologize, I'm in New York, as you can tell.
You in Brooklyn? Or you in?
I'm actually in the Bhakti Center.
You're in the Bhakti Center, cool.
Yeah. So I've noticed that financial element somehow brings out a more seriousness in the minds of those who participate. And it also, in a sense, obliges the person presenting something to ensure that it's a quality presentation. Whereas if you're not having that contribution, then you're like, anyway, I know the subject matter, I speak about this all the time. So you might just like, you know, go to a restaurant right before you give the presentation and walk in and just like sit down and talk. Not that you would do that, but I'm just saying there's something about that element that kind of, I don't know, it kind of makes people feel the weight of showing up in a more responsible way on either side. And so, but then there's always this like trepidation around that as being some sort of disturbance to the devotional psyche. And so we kind of just shy away from that. And I guess I'm getting just trying to understand that a little bit.
I think there's two ways to look at it, right? Like different dynamics can play out.
Right.
I'll share this though. Not long ago, like a couple of weeks ago or something like that, I was I was given a course even on our Patreon thing where I said it was so far the course has gone like 18 hours or something like that. You know, I've been doing it on weekends. So it was a real, you know, and so at the beginning, and it's for our Patreon members, although I think we advertise it a bit outside Patreon too. And I said, you know, if you like to leave a donation, you can leave it here. I say that at the beginning, I say that at the end, and that's all I say.
Right.
And I also said, and if you're a Patreon member, please don't feel obligated, because this is kind of what we want to give back to Patreon members, you know. Now, of course, some of our Patreon members give like $1 a month, so it's like, you know, they're getting yoga class. Actually, they get that too. They get yoga classes and they get different things like that, right? But I don't want to get into, you know. So I just say, you know, don't feel obligated. But if you want to give, and people gave, you know, I would consider generously, you know, they gave generously to it, and as and one day, as you know, I was just, no, this is when it was. It was the afternoon, and I'm sitting in my apartment. And I have all my books, you know, like I got a library here, you know, and I have some space and it's quiet, and I have a table and I got my books laid out on it, and I have all, you know, I got this whole afternoon, you know, and I can just absorb my mind in this, you know, as much as I like. And then I can share that, you know, and then I'll be able to share that. And I was thinking, and this is just all being facilitated by people, by a community of people that are saying, I value what you're giving. I'm going to give something back to it because this is what I want to support. Because everyone's supporting Netflix. Everyone's supporting, you know, we're supporting all different kind of things, you know, the fact is, right? But these people have said, okay, I want to support this. And I thought about that, and more profoundly than I'd ever felt before, I just felt this sense of gratitude to all the people that are contributing, and not only contributing, but also like just that are interested, you know, that want to tune in and hear this, that like thousands of people, you know, want to tune in and hear. I felt like it was a type of gratitude that was like a little like choking me up, you know. And then I had another similar experience where I was something happened to my financial situation, like the last vestige of steady regular income aside from this kind of disappeared. And it was you know, that's can be a little bit scary, you know. But then I was lying down to take a nap, you know, and just as I was lying down, it just occurred to me that like somehow I've been given this, my job is just to speak Bhagavatam, you know, and people give dakshin for that. And why wouldn't Krishna take care of me? You know, it's like, you know, of all the things I could be doing, somehow by the grace of the Vaishnavas, I'm doing this. Why wouldn't Krishna look after me? You know, but I get the trepidation that you're talking about. I think, you know, this podcast thing is interesting, right? It's like, it's like with Wisdom of Sages, it's kind of a new vision in certain ways, in quite a few ways. With what Nam's doing, it's also with what you guys are doing. It's also, I you know, in the end, when COVID is like in the rear view mirror, and
Okay.
yeah, but you know, we're gonna the everything. To me, my realization about COVID is it just changed everything. It changed, like, everybody that I knew either moved or changed jobs, or, you know, it's like, it just was a time for change. More than anything, it was about change. And you know, the ISKCON's going to change. And the kind of trepidation that you're speaking about, maybe that's, you know, going to change too, you know, through maybe these channels are going to have an effect on that too, where people, you know, it's kind of like everyone says, I'm supposed to give to the temple, even I'm dissatisfied with the temple, I get annoyed with the temple, I criticize the temple, but I'm supposed to give this, you know. And I'm not saying I don't want people to still give to the temples, but, you know, I'm saying people are going to, one thing that it's done is it's kind of, it's not about seniority. It's not about being established in any particular way. It's not because you've been given some position. People are going to tune into your podcast because they like to hear what you're offering. It's based on substance entirely.
Right.
And so then when people say, I like the substance, I want to give to that substance, that's a healthy model.
Mm.
And I don't think there has to be any trepidation.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good, Prabhu.
Flat, brahminically devotional attitude. Why should we be afraid? Vishnu will take care. And
somehow he does, doesn't he?
The rest of us were just like, that's not practical.
What's that, Jai? What was? Oh, yes.
I only asked for one-time donations. I had a Patreon, but I felt immediate pressure to deliver. I closed it. I think it works for some artists / creators, but it didn't for me.
But he's delivering.
Yeah, he is delivering.
Yeah.
Some final statements here.
Very, very final, quick question, Kaustuba Prabhu. When you finish the Bhagavatam on Wisdom of the Sages, have you ever thought about what you would do next?
Well, at the rate that we're going, it'll probably take about 5 years. Mm. Now the rate may change. Sometimes I think, what are we going to do when we get to 10th canto and it's just all, Krishna Leela, we re-examined what we wanted. I think there's a principle. We had to re-examine, do we want to continue, like at the end of the year, do we want to continue just going through it, every verse? We went through every verse in the first canto in the first year. And then we looked at this year and say, are we ready to, maybe we should be more topical. We do concern ourselves with people coming in brand new, like someone comes in from Joe Rogan, they don't know anything, and we're reading names and talking about places, and it's so unfamiliar. So what we did do is we put it like now what we call the wisdom nugget. Like at the beginning of each show, we try to have something that's kind of universal, so at least you're coming in the first 10 minutes are on some kind of universal truth. So that was an adjustment. And we also said we're ready to kind of like summarize and breeze over other sections. But I mentioned this just to illustrate that what's most important to us is the quality of the communication. If that means finishing the Bhagavatam, we'll finish in the Bhagavatam. If it means switching to something else, we'll switch to something else. If we never make it to finish it, that might happen. Who knows what the world holds. I hope we finish it. But
God forbid, so do we.
Yeah. So no, I haven't, but I'm sure there'll be plenty more to do, or you can always start it over again, right?
Right.
Of course. Yeah. Oh, Prabhu, thank you so much for your time. You've given us 2 hours. It's been such truly a blessing and a privilege to have you
myself
with us.
Too. Thank you guys. I totally admire what you do. We got to plug you guys sometime soon, on Wisdom of the Sages and bring you guys on. So thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, Prabhu. This was so glorious, and thank you. Of course, thank you to Raghu and Namarasa. Namarasa is a bosom buddy of mine, and of course, Kaustuba, you and Raghu, we really look up to more than because we're not. I'm not very expressive, so I just keep it. But I do want to say it now that I've actually been moved not only by what you've said, but also I want to amplify this, the vibration of your voice. It feels filled with a lot of just empathy and compassion and wisdom, and maybe it's the old age coming in with all that.
I try to get it raspier as I go, so it gives more of that sadhu flavor,
But hearing man, when I get a little bit older like this, I want to sound like this.
Oh, you're too kind. I look forward to seeing you on Harinam, huh? You're back.
Yes, I'm back. I will be on Harinam. I'm going to take a little lunch after this, and then I'm going out.
May I see you today?
That's amazing. I wish I was there too.
Come visit us.
Just one very brief housekeeping thing. If you want to get in contact with us, ariseheroicman@gmail.com. Otherwise, at ariseheroicman on Instagram. Please check out Wisdom of the Sages, your #1 daily yoga podcast. Kaustuba Prabhu, it's on all the major podcasting platforms.
Yeah.
YouTube, you can find it anywhere you search.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that kind of stuff.
Also, the late morning program. Of course, now I'm already plugged it, but we'll plug it again. What is latemorning.net? Oh my God, I forgot.
Sorry, Nam.
Still there now?
Tell us.
Okay. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
guys.
I'm gonna end the broadcast.
Thank
So-
you.